in the app. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it makes it a little bit easier because once I'm done here, I just download the Zoom file. One thing I do need to get is
Cool.
I need to get a ring light because the webcam here on this is garbage. Because
yeah. How do I look in this?
You look good. I mean, like you're right next to a window, I can tell, but it's night here,
Yeah.
so there's not much I can really do about that.
Yeah.
It's all good though. But dude, thanks again for doing this. Like I thought it'd be a cool topic considering you've been hyping The Witch for me for years, and it took me till like I think maybe 5 months ago I finally watched it.
So we might have actually discussed this then.
I don't think so. Like you told me like go into it knowing nothing, kind of go into a blank mind, and like a clean slate, and it was kind of those rare films that kind of just like passed me that was really well acclaimed, especially the year it came out. It was 2015, 2016. Is that right?
Sorry, it was a little laggy and glitchy just now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. So, yeah, but you've been hyping this movie for me for about like 4 or 5 years now. And I think it was just one of those films like that, highly critically acclaimed, but just went over my head. I had a bunch of other movies that I saw, and that was just the one big one that I missed that I just got to years later. And I watched it while I was in quarantine when I was stuck here. And I'm kind of kicking myself that I waited this long because it would have easily made my top 10 list had I saw it that year.
Yeah, it's actually my favorite horror movie. And I'm not like super like I know horror, but I'm not like deep into it like some people, but it just gripped me in like a really specific way. Like when I first saw it, like I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it when it shortly after it got on home video, and saw it when I used to live with my parents. They had a really big TV, and like the couch was really close, so it was a theatrical-esque experience. And yeah, it just like it was visceral. It like kind of just like it kind of just hit me, and like everything I like in horror, and like it just tackled a lot of interesting topics for me, like history and like the occult and witchcraft and all that stuff. It was just like it was just captive. It just captivated me the whole time.
Yeah, and I get that. And honestly, so I saw it once in quarantine, and I just rewatched it again this week to prepare for this, and it's a completely different viewing experience both times. Because the first time when I'm watching it, I was thinking like, okay, it's clearly kind of playing into the paranoia of witchcraft, very much like the Salem witch trials, and also a bit like The Crucible by Arthur Miller. It plays into that because it seemed like the lead character would be like an Abigail Williams sort of character, and everybody's kind of playing into that paranoia that was going on at that time, like in New England. But that's kind of what I thought. I thought it was just kind of like that kind of like heightened realism. So like I thought it was just like like maybe like there was that subtle hallucination with the kid. We'll probably talk about that later. But
well, actually, it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's so basically early on in the movie you see that their crops, like their corn, aren't doing well.
I've heard
like
this,
there's a good chance that ergot was in the corn, which is this fungus that if ingested has hallucinogenic properties. And there is evidence that this actually happened during the Salem witch trials, also in the 1600s, around that area in New England. And so there's a decent chance that a good amount of what you see in that movie is a hallucination. Kind of like The Lighthouse too, where it's like you're not exactly sure what you're supposed to believe, what's real, you know.
I think the reason that my ideas of it kind of changed the second time around is because I know the ending, and I feel like the ending for me really changed the movie, because I always thought, okay, it's just paranoia, maybe they have like the kid maybe just had a hallucination, but the ending changed everything. And yeah, whoever's watching the spoilers, whatever. I truly thought that like the ending was actually like real. Like they like, because it just, when you had like the quote unquote like, was it the devil, Satan, or kind of like like come to reality, and he kind of like put all these pieces together. And it's easy to think on a first time viewing that the black goat was just kind of like a symbolic representation of Tomlinson's rebellion. And at least that's what I thought, at least the first time watching it. But then once you kind of saw that, like, oh, maybe it's this mythical being, and then there's actually a cult of witches and they float up into the air. It just changed the idea of what the ending was for me, because I just thought it was just I thought it was just a really heightened reality. But then now that I know the ending, there are these kind of chess moves that are being put in place throughout the movie that like maybe like there is this kind of cult of witches that like, or like a quote unquote like Satan character that kind of orchestrated everything.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also interesting because the very last shot shows her like floating in the air alone. So it's not entirely clear whether or not, see, that could be a hallucination, because that could be, you know, everything like those witches aren't there. Maybe that is her imagination, but also they just might be all framed too. So it adds a lot of ambiguity, that the very last shot, and that ending, I know we're kind of jumping to the ending.
We're starting at the end to get to the beginning.
Yeah, but the thing, like, I love that scene because like most of the movie is very gray and monochrome, and then like that ending is just like when they're around the fire, it's very saturated, and it's like just like the most color you see in like the whole movie, really. And also like the soundtrack, the music they have there, just like I'll sometimes just listen to that song like in itself, and that will creep me out. Just that music is just intense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to be honest, I think this kind of gives an idea of kind of like a glimpse of what Robert Eggers is into, because I think if somebody wanted to make it a little more grounded, the movie would have just ended with Tomlinson just kind of going off into the forest naked, and then that's it. That would have been the ending. But the fact that he took it one step further to kind of have those like her going with the cult of witches and they're floating, that's the extra step that I think set him apart, to be like, okay, I'm gonna make a fantastical sort of like this is actually a fantastical world that I've built. It's not just like in this heightened reality. And that's like what separated him. And I think that was a great predecessor leading into The Lighthouse, which is very much more of a fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, another thing is that like I feel like it's really good payoff the end, because throughout the film you're seeing glimpses of these witches, and you know you're kind of getting a vague sense of things, but they're real. You know, Robert Eggers really he's not showing too much, you know, but it's not until the very end you realize, oh wow, there's this whole coven of witches that has presumably been, you know, behind all the crazy shit that's been happening. So I think the movie really needed that payoff at the end, considering everything. Because I could see it ending where she just goes into the woods and it's just kind of vague and ambiguous about what happens afterward. But I think it needed that payoff, because also it's like a very slow burn kind of movie. So like there was like a lot of dread in it. There wasn't a whole lot of jump scares or any like not too many horror cliches. So it really I think it needed like a visceral ending like that.
I agree. And I had watched a video about how Robert Eggers was thinking about his films, and he really puts an emphasis on atmosphere. His stories are very simple in the sense, but what he's really focused on is trying to create like a very specific atmosphere. I feel like it's much more clear in The Lighthouse, but you can kind of get an idea of that in The Witch for sure. He was very clear that like, okay, like a very kind of like sense of dread, eerie mysteriousness, like very overcast sort of lighting, like making the woods feel like you're feeling anxious, like very much playing into the horror tropes. But since he's kind of has this background, he was a production designer for years leading up to his directorial debut, it makes sense that that's his focus when it came to writing.
Yeah, that's true. Because
Mhm.
like yeah, I mean, both of his films just like I think the main horror is in the atmosphere and the sense of dread.
Mhm.
That it's like a few characters kind of in a confined space, dealing with horrors that they really don't have, they really don't know what's
Yeah.
going on around them.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also helpful, like, because his dialogue is pretty dense. Not in the sense I feel like it's more dense in, say, The Lighthouse. I wouldn't say it's overly
Yeah,
complicated, but it's just we're not like it's not easily digestible dialogue without
yeah,
question. It's just you have to
period
really
accurate.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I praise it for that matter.
Hmm.
Now
For
I'm
sure. No,
go
go
ahead,
on.
man. I know I was just gonna start
No,
diving into the symbolism.
please go for it.
Yeah. So, starting off the witch. So essentially, like each character is is represented by like some sort of animal, is what I saw in the witch.
Huh.
Like, or at least like in death. Like even the
Yeah.
baby starting off, there was
Mm.
a close up of like a dead chicken or like a dead duck in an eggshell.
Mhm.
It was just like a dead fetus that was just bloodied up. And this
Okay,
was
yeah,
kind of
that
in the
makes
first
sense.
act. Next up, you had the son. I think his name was Caleb. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, Caleb. He was the rabbit, I believe.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
rabbit. He ended up getting gutted. The twins, they were like gutted with sheep, from what I understand. When they got
Mm.
locked away in the shed, you didn't
Yeah.
see the twins, but you just saw the gutted sheep. And I'm like, okay, those
Okay.
making that
Hmm.
connection. I was trying to figure out what would the dad represent. There was the dog earlier in the film, but I don't think that would have been a representation. And then I also
Hmm.
tried to think about the mom. I didn't really know what to think
Well,
about
there was
that.
that crow when
Oh,
she
right, the
like towards the
crow.
end.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. You're completely right. But yeah, it was just like a really nice planting and payoff because like the rabbit was very well placed, like very well
Hmm.
planted. And it was just, but like once it kind of started building up, you're like, okay, now we see it going.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I never thought of the characters represented by different animals.
Yeah,
It's
or at least their
interesting.
deaths, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Hmm.
And another recurring thing that I wanted to highlight in the film is Edgar's use of zoom ins. Not completely original in horror films, but to kind of
Hmm.
add that eeriness to the woods, like you just
Yeah.
always see these little subtle zoom ins that you
Hmm.
that place in the forest, and they're not like, of course, dolly shots, like focal changes. And I feel like that's just
Hmm.
one of those little recurring nods that he was able to do to make the woods scary.
Well, yeah, because when you zoom in on like a zoom lens, the shot will get tighter,
Mhm.
so it kind of adds to this, sense of dread where the characters are in this confined space, relatively speaking.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it definitely adds to it.
Yeah. I'll also say that because I feel like zoom lenses in themselves can be uneasy because our eyes don't act like that. Our eyes don't change focal
Mm,
lengths. So I think that's
that's
why
a
it
good
makes it
point.
uneasy. If you ever heard Sidney Lumet, he did like Swamp Angry Men, like Serpico, like Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, like
Yeah.
Dog Day Afternoon. He's highly against zoom lenses, but purely on the fact that your eye doesn't act like that. He wanted a very authentic world, and I
Yeah.
feel like while well, I should say more realistic, but when it comes to
Yeah.
Edgar's, who is looking for fantastical, that's like a great idea to kind of add to his kind of more fantasy
Hmm.
world, is using zooms.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing something realistic, it would make sense to not use zoom lenses, but
Mhm.
got to use the right tool for the right job, really.
Exactly. Now, what else did you try to did you pick up on the witch when you rewatched it?
Let me look at my notes real quick.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm gonna go through
Um,
mine too.
well, here's an interesting thing: is that right when they are leaving the town in the beginning of the movie, um, you see some Native Americans walking by in this town, and I can't help, and I feel like Robert Eggers does everything pretty intentionally, so I can't help but feel like like here's this like New England town in the 1600s that has some Native Americans that are kind of casually walking through, and then here's this family this Puritan family that's being banished, which to me kind of speaks to the I mean, it's not entirely clear what the family or what the father did that got them banished. It's a little bit vague, but it kind of, I feel like, shows sort of like how ostracized they really were. And they must have done something that was pretty egregious. But then this is also a puritanical society, so they're very uppity about things. So I feel like that was somewhat significant. Yeah.
It had to have been something maybe religiously based. I don't want to say it was like I mean, like, just considering like that was a big thing that the father and a bit of the mother had consistently emphasized, but like, was it just like a different set of ideas on religion? Because that's how the settlers first came here. And then just because, I have a different set of religion, like I kind of get banished, like could be a possibility, but there's got to be something more of that. And I have a feeling that must have been with Tomlinson, because that was the opening shot was on her. So maybe she was on trial.
That's a good point. I mean, she kind of is the rebel rouser of the movie. So, I wouldn't be surprised if she had something to do with it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but also with that's all good. With the Native Americans, it's also like because these white Puritans are like on their land as well, and this is, I believe this is in the 1620s, if I'm not mistaken.
It was something like that. I can't remember the exact time period, but it had to have been like 1620s, 1630s.
This is early on with Europeans in the New World, so it's also, there could be something to the European settlers taking the land as well. There could be an element there, although I'm not sure. That might be something that's hinted at, that's not really explored.
No, that makes sense. And I think it was just that's kind of the backdrop of the history, but I'm honestly just really impressed by his research for that world, because even Defoe, like when he was interviewed for The Lighthouse, praised Edgar's for the amount of research that was presented to them to be like period accurate, because he's even mentioned not only the research, but like trying to be period accurate even with his next film. Was it The Northman? Is that what it is? Yeah, because he's trying to figure out like how to be authentic to the period while also dealing with controversial issues like today, like because during the 11th century, is it 10th century or 11th century Iceland is where it's taking place, and there's going to be there's going to be slavery, there's going to be domestic abuse. So he's trying to figure out a way, how do I be period authentic while also addressing these serious kind of controversial issues as they are today. So
definitely the period accuracy with the dialogue and the costuming, the sets. It's like that really grounds it too, and makes you it makes it feel very immersed when that a lot of time was put into making it look as accurate as possible. Because even in The Lighthouse, they used lenses from the 1920s.
I didn't know that.
And they shot it. So it takes place in the 1890s. So, it's, those lenses are only like, 25, 30 years removed from the time in which the movie takes place in.
There was also a quote by Eggers that I really liked that kind of gets an idea of his kind of aesthetics. He brought up Emmanuel Lubezki, saying how much Lubezki loved Alexa 65, because it's as close as we've ever gotten to seeing through a clear window, because film has always been kind of very very like muddled or like grainy. It's just like we have a clear window. Eggers is like, well, I kind of like peeking through a dirty window. Like that's the aesthetic that I like. So it's a nice contrast to kind of get an idea of his aesthetic and kind of the worlds that he's interested in, or like the sets that he's interested in.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And even I also saw Edgar's had he had the opportunity to go back to the witch, he would have added more noise since he shot it digitally. He would have added more digital noise to it. So it was just one of those little things that he would have added to be like, okay, this is really more the way I think. But
you should George Lucas it.
No, she actually just ends at the woods. There's no witches.
Yeah. She shouts, "No!" at the end.
I hate sand.
Yep.
All right. So I'm trying to think before we go into the lighthouse. So I also want to talk about a little foreshadow that I realized the second time around, and I'm surprised I didn't get it the first time around. Before the boy dies, there's the red apple that he throws up.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know why, I guess in my first viewing just went over my head that like the red apple was a symbol of the I'll say Red Riding Witch, because like she's got the red hood.
Yeah.
And or the big boob red witch, like
yeah. I mean, I feel like, Apple typically represents like sin, like original sin, like in Adam and Eve. So, my thoughts, or I jumped to that, but also, was the apple that he threw up, was the apple itself, I forget, was it like, did it have like rot in it, or was it like a decent, like an apple looked like you could eat?
Well, it was a whole apple. I don't remember it being rotten, but I think there must have been like maybe some tooth marks, considering it was like a full apple in his mouth that he just threw up. Like the dad had to pry his jaw open to get it out. So I imagine there were some marks to it, but like it was a full apple.
Sure. Because like my thinking is that like it's like ironic when like their crops aren't doing well, like they don't have that much food, but then he throws up this like perfectly good apple, that they could eat. It's like it's kind of like a slap in the face from the witches in a way.
Really, it really is. And to even add a little bit more to the apple symbolism, the apple can be like a symbolism of sex or like sex appeal, very much like The Room with Danny.
Oh yeah.
But like that was hinted on when Kayla would look at Tomlinson. She's like constantly looking at her chest throughout the early parts of the film, and that just sets up how seductive that witch was, because she was like big boobs, like redwood.
Well, so especially like for him, as this like young boy who hasn't really seen, he's really only seeing his family at the moment, and he doesn't really know that many people. So seeing that woman there in the forest, and like she's looking, like, because she looks pretty good by our standards. But imagine really, like back then, like. That must be like the most, sexiest woman he's ever seen by far.
Probably. And to be honest, like when was the last person he's ever contacted since he left, like outside of his family? And other than maybe like a Native Americans that maybe his dad sold the cup to, maybe just saw, not really interacted. That might have been the only people.
Yeah.
Like you don't really know.
Yeah. So so like I feel like that scene is really intense if you really think about like his perspective,
Exactly.
But and then just that scene in general where he throws up the apple, where he's kind of like just spouting all this like I don't even know, like
honestly,
it like an ancient text or something.
It really just the dialogue kind of flew over my head, but because of the way it's shot and the way it was set up, you kind of got an idea that like this out of body sort of like thing is happening. Yeah. Like, and it just seemed a little bit like this kind of strange exorcism sort of situation.
Yeah. It was that kid did a really good job at like
killed it
in that possession state. Yeah.
Well, it's actually crazy to think that the whole cast was amazing, but just crazy how Anya Taylor-Johnson's career just skyrocketed, because this was her first role, like her first like big credited role.
Yeah,
and she's been
definitely. I mean, her career is really taken off, particularly recently.
Yeah, and I can't wait for the Last Night in Soho, but I haven't seen The Queen's Gambit.
Oh
I've
yeah.
seen Morgan, Split, Glass. Well, Glass. I gotta point out. Gotta give out the shout out cameo.
Yeah. It's a good one. Not just
Yeah.
because I make a brief cameo in it.
Yeah. Well, like I always smile ear to ear whenever I see you in it because I'm just like, I think I've only seen it twice, but like, but like the times that
Yeah.
I've seen you, I'm just like, I'm ear to ear because it's quite clearly you in the scene, and you're with
Yeah.
Sarah Paulson. You're sharing.
Yeah. For people watching, I'm in the movie Glass. One of the last scenes in a comic book shop, and Sarah Paulson's like walking down this aisle.
I'm sorry,
But
dude.
that's
Can you
not a
say
Robert
that
Eggers movie.
Yeah, sorry. I would tell you to say that one more time. I think I cut out for a second, but like, but check out Glass. You'll see Spencer. He's like 10 minutes before the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Okay, but sorry, back to Eggers. So, do we still have to talk about The Witch, or should we move on to The Lighthouse?
I think I might have gone through all of my notes. Well, also it's like there's an element of it because this family has to go out on their own. They build this house, they have their land right by the woods, and it's kind of like the hubris of man thinking that they can overtake nature, because nature's like a big theme in the movie. In a lot of ways, it's like it is, even though there are these witches, it's kind of a man versus nature story in a way, because the wilderness is very brutal. You could even take away the witch, like you could take away like the occult and the witch elements, and it's still pretty brutal because the religious fanaticism, along with just like the desperation with food and survival.
Yeah, and I completely agree, because that itself could be a film. Like, take out the witch, like that, like what you just mentioned is a film in itself.
Yeah.
Quick question, out of curiosity, do you ever see Brothers, his short film before The Witch?
I have not. No.
I haven't seen it either. I probably should have, but like it's a 10-minute short. I know it's on YouTube, but it was essentially his pitch film for The Witch.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, like he had tried getting The Witch made, and I think it was his agent or someone mentioned like, okay, you want to get this made, you have to kind of set your atmosphere. The two things he was focused on was A, can I make the witch scary, and B, can I get naturalistic performances out of kids? So those were his two things that he had shown The Brothers. But at some point we've got to check it out. But just like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that'll be good to watch, because well, it's also like a director kind of doing a proof of concept in the form of a short before
that's
doing
exactly
the feature, which I think often is the way to go, as just kind of showing, hey, I can do this at least. So hopefully that short can translate into a feature in some way.
Well, I think that's the practical way to go now, considering like you can make a short affordably self-funded, like, but if you want to make your film that's in like the millions of dollars, I think that film was 4 million. Like, you're gonna need like you have to have some sort of proof, like exactly like a proof of concept. You're gonna try to get that kind of financing.
Yeah, because if you do a short and then kind of turn it into a feature, you have the short that can exist on its own, and then you can use that as your proof of concept, and you can potentially use footage that you got for that short film in the feature potentially.
Exactly.
So it's really, I think, usually the way to go.
And I would say even more so when you don't have a name attached to it, because even The Lighthouse, like, okay, like they have Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson attached to it. Like, you had unknowns attached to The Witch. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the two parents were in Game of Thrones, I know.
Yeah, they look very much like Game of Thrones characters. I got to give it to the dad though. The dad's eyes is what sold it to me. Yeah,
he's really intense.
All right, but I think on that note, good time to transition to The Lighthouse.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing I got to say about The Lighthouse is it's the best SpongeBob episode ever. Have you heard people compare it to SpongeBob?
I haven't. You got to tell me this.
Like, so Willem Dafoe is Mr. Krabs, and Robert Pattinson is SpongeBob, and it's people. There's some obvious analogs, and people have done edits where they edit like SpongeBob clips into like the trailer of The Lighthouse, or I even saw someone just use like SpongeBob music and like edited like a little thing with the Lighthouse, and yeah, I mean there's some comparisons.
I never knew that. Like, honestly, I've got to look that up now because I'm so tempted.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Honestly, my overarching idea of what the Lighthouse is, it's basically one guy trying to get off. That's basically what I see the movie as. This one guy just being like sexually frustrated for a month, and he's just trying to get off, and finally gets off, and just like ends up getting eaten by seagulls.
That is one way to view it on a high level, that's for sure. It's funny when you say get off, I was thinking like get off the island when you first said that. But it still holds true though. But well, yes, yeah, that's one way to view it.
Yeah, but I feel like I think it goes without question, since like the film is highly inspirational to me because I made a short based on it. Inspiration of it, but
yeah, I remember seeing it. I was like, it's like the Lighthouse kind of.
It pretty much is the Lighthouse, like pretty much like thematically and we use the same aspect ratio. It's pretty much the Lighthouse, but I don't know. Yeah. It was, but like trying to use pandemic themes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the movie was perfect for quarantine, because it came out like maybe 6 months before the pandemic hit. So it was, and then it got on Amazon Prime. So it was. I remember I rewatched it during quarantine, like April 2020, and I remember it felt very relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, and it really is a phenomenal movie. Like, but it is a movie that like at times I just kind of go with it, even though I don't know exactly what the characters are saying.
It's true. It is difficult to follow because I've seen it twice, and yeah, I mean it's like, I mean, film's a visual medium, so sometimes if I miss dialogue, I'm just like, all right, because like some side note, I see a lot of people that have like subtitles or closed captioning on like just like English dialogue movies. And it makes sense if sometimes it can be hard to hear, so it can be good so it makes sure you're following, but I don't want to be looking down on the screen. I'd rather just, if I miss something, maybe I'll rewind it if it seemed important. If not, I'm just gonna, just take it all as an experience,
Yeah. And honestly, that's a film where like you're probably missing a lot of key information if you're like looking for the dialogue, but because of the way it's shot, and it's not a very overly complicated story, I think it's in its favor. It's just basically two guys, just these two guys just slowly just can't handle each other or can't be around each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's most of it.
A lot of other things, but so I guess kind of jumping off that, like, do we want to jump into a bit of the symbolism? Because I don't really have.
Go for it.
I don't really have that much. I mean, to be quite honest, like, there's the seagull, I guess, to kind of put in perspective. But I feel like that was a really like more of a plant, like, because you've Defoe's character mentioned that the one-eyed seagull is supposed to represent a sailor, and you're not supposed to kill, don't kill the seagull, or else like shit's going down. And essentially at the end of the first act, he kills the seagull, and it's a really well done shot. It's like all one and it's a brutal killing.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot of build up to that too, because it's clear he's getting frustrated, and feels like that was set up really well, and then it's a good payoff, at the end when he just bashes it constantly.
Sorry, just a quick note that I didn't write down, but I also thought about this. If you ever look at both those films, the only like transitions that he uses for his films are just cut to blacks. There's no dissolves, no flashy cuts.
Okay.
They're usually J cuts, L cuts, or just cut or like just cut the blacks. So just very just very simplistic transitions in his films. If you ever looked that out, because I just thought because that was a note that I did
for his style.
Yeah. But
sorry.
But yeah. Oh no, it's okay. But kind of falling with the seagull. Well, actually, I love the seagulls that deliberately look fake. Like they just literally look like they're all a bunch of string, just like on like a matte painting.
Or it could be part of the hallucinating, you know?
Exactly. But but kind of going off that one-eyed seagull. So I remember one part of the film. I think it was kind of towards the end of the second act. He ended up pulling up like a lobster crate, and ended up revealing like a sailor had cut off one eye. So I guess that was supposed to be like the follow-up to the seagull.
True.
Yeah, and then at the end, Pattinson is getting pecked by a one-eyed seagull. So just kind of making that pay off.
Yeah, definitely.
What did you think? Well, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go on, please.
I know. I was going to go on to the sexual nature of the movie.
Yes, it's a very big part of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like they
like love each other and hate each other at the same time.
I mean, very much like a marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it was full on, and like again, like the whole kind of idea of like sexual frustration was just like full on in there because it's a very homoerotic movie.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's also funny too because like the two of them have the same name, so you know there's also a possibility that they're the same person. Maybe there's an older version and a younger version of the same character. So you know when you add that to the mix, it also makes it even stranger.
Yeah, and it makes sense that like it just kind of adds that layer of like hallucinate or like fantastical element to the world. And I'm also just trying to remember all the like the sex symbols that kind of came around. I mean, there was the clear doll that he found in his bed.
Yeah, there was the mermaid. There was the little like trinket mermaid, and then there was the actual mermaid.
Yeah, the siren.
Hallucination.
Yeah, and then of course the lighthouse itself is a dick.
Phallic symbol. Yep.
Full on. Now,
and well, also there's that one moment towards the end where like he's like, is it like he's on that like siren, and then it ends up being Willem Dafoe?
Yes.
So you know.
I mean,
it's
he's really doing whatever it takes to get off.
Frustration in the movie.
Full on.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Hey, if Willem Dafoe was in front of me, I'd think about it. I'm not gay, but I'd think about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, in prison, for example, a lot of men will go to that option just because, your circumstances will definitely change your actions.
Yeah.
And your thoughts for sure,
The theme of isolation, man.
Exactly. So, it kind of it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Yeah, because I mean, also the movie's a lot about identity, because it's not entire. Because like the Pattinson character is going under a false name for most of it, and he took on the identity of this man that did he kill him or he accidentally?
So it was a death that he didn't prevent. Like he saw it coming but did nothing about it. It was something around those lines.
Yeah. So, he takes on his name, but then his original name is also the Willem Dafoe's character. So it's kind of like there's a lot of issues with identity in the movie.
Yeah, and it really adds that layer. But I'm just trying to think like I don't really know what to make of that, because like then are they the same character? Because I want to think that they are.
It could be an interpretation. I mean, the fact that they have the same name, and it's kind of like, because it's also funny because the movie, because I remember the second time I watched it, I was just like, when does this end? Like I forgot that like it feels like it's like about to end, but then there's like a lot more to it, and like it just feels like it keeps going and going and going. So it's like it's kind of unclear how long they've been on that island.
Mm-hmm. It feels very much like a Waiting for Godot sort of time, if that makes sense.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, it's a Samuel Beckett play, but time is kind of played similar as it is in The Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear the passage of time, which kind of adds to the hallucinogenic element of the movie. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell like what you're supposed to believe and what's real and everything. So, I'm saying that there is an interpretation that they could be the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like almost like a Fight Club type of situation.
Identity.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, but also, I mean, this is all spoilers here. So, but what was I gonna say? Well, okay. So about symbolism, how do you interpret the climax when he's staring at the light itself?
I mean, it's him finally coming. That to me is literally the ending, because that's essentially his desire, is just to like see what this light is about, and seeing that like it's like the lighthouse being a phallic symbol, it's a dick. It's him like finally like, not like getting off, and then and
I feel like come down afterward. Tumbling down the stairs.
Yeah, tumbling down the stairs. Yeah. Spot on. But it's.
I mean, go on.
Well, I was gonna say but it's basically like kind of going through the consequences of what you're willing to do to be not sexually frustrated. And the fact is that he became a murderer just so like he can.
Yeah.
So well, he can kind of get his.
There's also, I interpret it as almost like forbidden knowledge, like again Adam and Eve, like the forbidden fruit, almost like seeing God in a way, and it's almost like. Or it almost reminded me of Raiders of the Lost Ark when they open up
the Ark of the Covenant.
And the faces melt. I mean, it had a kind of similar vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of thought of it in that way. Maybe like a Tower of Babel or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly what it was going for. Just kind of like this, like very like larger than life light coming out, and it just slowly gets brighter, but.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like the sexual nature is just there. That like that's my idea of the ending. Like it. Sure. I mean, fantastical to a way, but it's just there's just so many sexual undertones in it, and it just like it beats you over the head. Like there's one scene where he's won the trinket, he's with the mermaid, like he's having that little intimacy with Willem Dafoe. Then he finally gets to the lighthouse, which is a penis. It's just all there.
It's true. Like, it's true.
Yeah. And even Edgar said like Freud and Carl Jung would have a ride with this, like just kind of like that sexual deviance.
Well, going off of that, I think I heard this before that. So the movie The Witch is about becoming a woman, and The Lighthouse is about becoming a man.
I think that's very fair to say. And even Edgar's a set and even people have come out with The Witch saying it's a feminist movie.
Yeah, there's definitely that element to it as well.
Yeah, and it's and I think that's a very justifiable interpretation, because like it's literally like a woman trying to break apart what her family's expectations of her are by being like demanded to like domestic roles or like to get married. So it's very much like a woman becoming independent, even though like her family was sort of murdered by her. She kind of signed a deal with the devil. I don't know, but
well, when she says "I be the witch of the wood," in like the first act, it's kind of that's foreshadowing. So
yeah, but that makes sense. That but I never heard that comparison between the two, but that makes sense.
Yeah. What else do I got here?
Well, I'm just curious. Have you ever read any of Edgar's screenplays?
I have not.
Okay, so I haven't full on read them. I just kind of skimmed them. But if I recommend you taking a look afterwards for a few minutes, he is super into action lines. Like he's very like it almost feels like in a way reading a novel. Like he has like there's never a moment where he says like they fight. He describes like every movement that's going on. Like he takes a fist, then he moves here. I can't remember anything specific off the top of my head, but I remember reading the first few pages of the Lighthouse script. I don't think the first line of dialogue is said until like page 6 or 7. Like the first 5 to 6 pages are all action. And he said his scripts are very deliberate in the way that that he has to be the director for it, because a director like would not be able to take that script the way he wrote it. It would go in a different direction, and he just wrote it very much in a way that like he would be the director.
That makes sense, because once you get, if a writer has too much detail, then that can be, because a writer ultimately, if they're just writing, they don't have that much control over how the final movie looks, because producers, directors, everyone's gonna, all the cooks in the kitchen are gonna have their own recipe. So the writer often gets screwed over in that process if they're not also the director. So
exactly,
that makes a lot of sense.
Now, do we still want to talk about the Lighthouse, or do we want to move?
Yeah, I have a few more things
I
want to talk about. So there's that boat noise throughout.
Oh,
that
I meant to bring that up.
Like deep, like
yeah, the fog.
It's interesting because because it's like it is that sound always diegetic, or is it because it's also kind of part of the sound, like the sound track as well?
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah, it feels very much like the sound design, because I can agree that I think it makes sense that in the opening it's diegetic, but I think ongoing it becomes less. It becomes like
part of the hallucination.
Like exactly, non-diegetic, because because I imagine it's only when they come in on the island is where that noise would come from. Because is it coming from the lighthouse? Because I would only imagine it coming from the boat, or the boats that maybe pass by the lighthouse, maybe.
That would make sense, because, well, I mean, I guess even if it is hallucinated, it is diegetic in that it's happening within the universe of the movie in some sense.
Yeah, or at least the characters in a way acknowledge it, if that makes sense. Like
that's how they're sensing it, even if it's not actually there.
And Max wanted you. I asked about this question about Max last week, and we talked about the foghorns. Did you find them annoying, like overbearing?
No, I didn't think so.
Okay. Yeah,
I thought it was an interesting sound element to the movie that kind of, I think it added to the kind of, like, you're constantly questioning, what's real, what's imagined. So, that's a part of that.
Yeah, and because the reason I brought it up is because someone who would watch the film with him hated it, and it was just one of those like, you're taking me out, or like she was getting annoyed by it. But I think the foghorns were supposed to evoke a bit of paranoia.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so like I get if you're annoyed with it, but that's kind of the idea. It's supposed to kind of elevate you, stress you. So I get if that's kind of unliked, but I don't know if that was the way they were feeling, but I guess that's like, but I think the intention was for that to be created, and I think Edgar's pulled it off.
Yeah, I think I liked that sound design element for sure. I thought it really, in some ways, it tied a lot of things together.
I'll also just to point this out, Lighthouse did get an Oscar nominee for Best Cinematography, but I feel like it was kind of a little. I thought it was a little overlooked for the acting performances. I'm shocked that Dafoe and Pattinson didn't get anything.
Particularly Dafoe, like that monologue he does where he doesn't blink. Hark! Yeah.
Also, I don't think we pointed this out. Great, like amazing amount of fart humor in it.
That is hilarious. How like it's like a very serious movie for the most part, and then there's a lot of fart jokes in it, and I love potty humor still, so that like I love that part of it.
Yeah, well, like it's because I'm not really into potty humor, but there are like two movies that have farts that I love. This being one of them, The Lighthouse. The other one being Swiss Army Man.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, you gotta watch it. Like a fart is a has symbolic meaning in the film. It's like like a fart is critical. You gotta check it out. I don't know if it's still on Amazon Prime, but A24, like gotta watch it. Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano, like great movie.
Okay.
Yeah, very much like a two-hander too. Like it's very like there are other characters that come in a little bit, but like it's very much a two-hander, just like The Lighthouse.
Okay.
But definitely much different style, like of course.
Yeah, for sure. Well, another thing is, I'm not sure if this was intentional, but so you know how they had a lot of establishing shots of like the island, like the lighthouse, and like kind of the stormy seas and everything. In one of those shots, I could have sworn I see something that looked like a ghost.
Do you remember when?
Now maybe I don't remember this. I don't remember when it was. It was sometime in the middle of the movie. You know, maybe just because it's black and white, and you know, maybe I was just seeing things, but I couldn't help but see some kind of ghostly figure in one of those establishing shots. But maybe that wasn't intentional. Maybe I just saw something that wasn't there. Maybe throughout the course of the movie, I was hallucinating just because of the whole experience. But I thought I might have seen a ghost in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, the only sort of like, I would think mythical figure would have been the siren that's in the film.
Sure.
So like, so maybe like some sort of representation of that, like, because I don't, or like, there was another person that was in the film trying to like that was like a hallucination. And I think the guy that Pattinson's character kind of subtly killed or like didn't do anything about it. I think he makes like an appearance as kind of like Pattinson's subconscious.
I don't remember that part. Was that must have been brief?
It's very brief. I mean, like there are a lot of short scenes like that where like it's literally just like Pattinson just kind of like doing mundane work, or like he's having like a battle with his subconscious sort of deal. There's a lot of that in this film. There aren't very
definitely
like the two-hander shots go for a while, but like those little mundane Robinson shot like moments with Robert Pattinson just doesn't like, they're pretty rapid.
Yeah. Well, the movie's also like about kind of like sort of how like work is so like mundane and like because like Defoe makes him do a lot of like pointless work, and it kind of is like, you know, you got this boss underling kind of dynamic, and it kind of like shows the idea of how pointless work can be often.
Also,
work for the sake of work.
Yeah, exactly, and that's very much for the character Pattinson. But kind of going along with that, kind of towards the end of the film, he saw the logbook, and Defoe recommended that that Pattinson would get severance without pay. Do you think he's doing that, like just because, like, you know, like not necessarily like a screw you, but just kind of I guess maybe he's just lonely and just wants a reason for him to stick around, or has to come back, or I don't know, just like, you know, I don't know.
Probably all the above, really.
Yeah, it's because I was trying to figure out the decision exactly, and I think it's just like a combination of those things. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's I mean, he doesn't want to admit it, but he definitely wants him around. But then, you know, he's kind of, I guess he feels like he has to be a hard ass on him because, you know, but also plays into like, if they're the same person, that it's like, you know, the older version being difficult on the younger version. Maybe I shouldn't lean too deep into they're the same person theory. I don't think it's necessarily true, but I just think it's an interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's essentially Eggers' films, is that like, I feel like they're very much like art pieces where like you can see it from different perspectives. I feel like that that it feels like a Kubrick film in that sense as well. Like it feels very much like 2001, where like there's just a bunch of symbolism, and you can kind of layer in, you just take out what you can out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Also, another thing I wanted to bring up about this movie is that I read that it's actually based on a 19th century myth about two lighthouse keepers named Thomas who die in a storm.
It's Edgar Allan Poe.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a Poe story.
I didn't know. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I don't know actually, I want to look it up right now real quick. But I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's an Edgar Allan Poe story.
Well, I was just reading on the Wikipedia article that Edgar's was going to adapt an unfinished Poe story called The Lighthouse, but I think that the idea changed along with the development.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it real quick. The Lighthouse is one of the most striking and powerful horror films of 2019, but it's actually based on an old, unfinished Edgar Allan Poe story.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Coming from The Raven, like, I mean, it's very much like, feels very much like a Poe, like Edgar Allan Poe, just very dark, gothic.
Yeah, it's so yeah, this is in a certain sense a Poe adaptation.
Really, probably his best adaptation, to be quite honest. That or maybe Sherlock.
Sherlock?
Well, do you not know? Edgar Allan Poe basically wrote the foundation of Sherlock Holmes, like that, and then
I didn't know that.
If you look it up, he basically created the detective genre. Poe wrote a character called Dupin with kind of like unnamed narrator, and Arthur Conan Doyle basically took that story, changed the characters, and just wrote a series, and that was Sherlock Holmes.
Huh.
So yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow.
So basically, Poe invented horror. He also invented the detective genre. So
I learn something new every day. Huh.
What a guy.
Also about so I think a director who I think you could compare Robert Eggers to would be Ari Aster.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of there's some similarities between their because they both have two features, and also I feel like all four films end somewhat similarly, where it's the protagonist like embracing the madness around them.
That's very much fair. And I think even more so with the why am I blanking on this? His second Midsummer. I think very much so with Midsummer. Yeah. And then and essentially the cult element with The Witch, it feels a lot like that. And then just kind of like the tragedy, or like even like kind of mental insanity in The Lighthouse kind of pairs with Hereditary.
True. Yeah. It's I mean, both directors I really like, and always going to be curious what they come up with next.
I honestly think we're living in a great moment for horror right now. Probably, like, I think in terms of original horrors, one of the best moments right now happening.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because you have those two directors, Robert Eggers and Ari Aster, Jordan Peele doing social commentary horror, and do you know Mike Flanagan? Or Ryan Flanagan, I can't remember, but it was Mike or Ryan.
I heard of the name.
He did The Haunting of Hill House, and he also did. Actually a good movie, Ouija: Origin of Evil. The sequel, Ouija, is actually like a good movie. He also did Hush, which is kind of like a thriller. He did Dr. Sleep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like, and also
nice.
With us, kind of a local boy. He went to Towson. So like a little local. He also did.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he also did Oculus with Karen Gillan, and
yeah, that was really good.
And I'm trying to think of one more that he did. I'm blanking on his directorial debut, but I'm sure it's on YouTube. But like, anyway, like those four guys are just killing it in horror, and I kind of want to give an honorable mention. I haven't seen her last film, but I think it's is it Essie Davis that did The Babadook? Or am I thinking of the actress? Jennifer Kent, maybe? I can't remember.
I'm not sure, but it's a great movie, actually.
The Babadook is amazing.
It's funny you say that, too, because this is my girlfriend's, actually.
Yes!
There's this book you can get.
Yes, that's great.
It's literally right next to me. That's kind of about like the mythology behind the Babadook.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and
But
no, I think that's pretty much all I had to really comment. But like, I think, like, to be quite honest, I think we're living in one of the best times for the horror genre, at least like since like the 90s, where, or at least, or I guess the 80s, where like slasher was a big thing, slasher movies.
yeah, there's been a number of phases, you know, and then, you know, there was a lot of late 90s, early 2000s. There's geez, I'm drawing a blank.
I mean, there was Wes Craven, like
found footage.
Yeah, found footage.
Yeah, well, Scream is kind of a sort of
A satire
a
on
meta version of
yeah.
the slasher, and then you got into found footage and some of the torture porn stuff.
Yeah, like
in
Saw.
the early 2000s.
I feel like
Yeah.
the kind of like ghostly girl is a thing, like The Ring and The Grudge. Was a bit of a
like the
thing.
Japanese type horrors that
Yeah, and then kind of going off found footage, Paranormal Activity. I actually think the first one's a really good movie.
I haven't seen any of them actually.
The first one is actually worth it. And it's one of the, and
Yeah.
it's actually like a real underdog movie. It made for $15,000. I think it was shot in like 2 weeks, and it made like $150 million at the box office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to check that out at some point.
Yeah, but good movie.
Robert Eggers' next movie, The Northman. We should briefly discuss that too.
Briefly. So not too much information about it right now.
Yeah. Looks like it's coming out April 2022. The cast, it looks amazing. I mean, you got like Nicole Kidman, Willem Dafoe, Anya Taylor-Joy, Alexander Skarsgård. Both the parents from The Witch are going to be in it. Bjork, the singer Bjork. It's because it's going to be like a revenge story. It's like it's going to be like Vikings, and you said like the 10th, 11th century. Kind of going along with the sort of folk stories that Robert Eggers tells, but maybe this one's a little less of a horror. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be like a fantasy to some degree. Like, I think it'll play into the realism, but there's going to be some sort of fantastical element to it. I think that just it's going to become a bit of a style. It's just that like he's going to create like a fairly authentic world, but he's going to make like, a very stylistic like fantasy. Like I just keep thinking like Back to the Witch, because it feels like a very like grounded, realistic movie until the end. That's
yes. Because I guess everything up till that is mostly realistic-ish.
Yeah.
But then you get hit with that ending.
Exactly.
But then in The Northman, Bjork's gonna play a witch in it of some kind. So that might play into the fantastical elements.
I'm actually looking at the Wikipedia right now. Bjork plays a Slav witch, so Slovakian witch. I don't know. Or maybe a slave is what it's supposed to be. It says Slav, S-L-A-V, so maybe a slave witch. But I also see that like Ethan Hawke is also in it. I didn't know that. He's like my favorite actor.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Huh. That's I'm really curious about what's going to happen with that one.
But like I guess, but the only part of the synopsis that I see is that Viking Prince Amleth goes to extreme deaths to seek justice for the murder of his father. Now that is based on a folklore, but I feel bad that I haven't really researched that in prep for this. I just kind of went with it. But I kind of want to go into it with a blank head, or like a clean slate when I go see it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, generally speaking, I think that's the best way to go into most movies.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be checking that one out when it comes out in April.
Yeah. All right. But on that note, I think it's probably a good time to wrap things up. I mean, like, we're looking forward to that next one. But dude, thanks a lot for doing this, man. I mean, Like I was all again good catching
Thank
up,
you
and I'm
for
glad
having
we
me
were able
on,
to talk
man.
this movie. Yeah, man, it was fun. And to be and
Yeah.
like yeah,
I
like
mean, I just gush about The Witch.
I
I
mean
just
this
gush about The Witch already. So like, might as well record it.
well, like that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you about it, because you've been pushing me to watch it for so long, and usually I'm always on top of movies, but it was just one of those movies that just kind of went over my head. I finally watched it, and I'm just like, God, now I got to talk to Spencer about this because I thought of you right after I watched it. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
make this came up. I'm like, let's do this.
Yeah, man, it's been fun.
All right, dude. All right, man, we'll take it easy. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I gotta still stay up for a couple more hours, get some work done, but be safe. All right, man.
Cool. Sounds good. You too,
All right,
man. It's been
safe.
nice.
All right, be safe, dude.